As most of you know, the Donna Howell Show is in part a viewer-driven project. We want to respond to the questions that you've been asking. One of the main questions and subjects that has been repetitiously brought up, all of the social media, the emails, the personal emails that I'm receiving, the feedback is you guys want to know more about us as a family, our dynamic, how we operate in ministry, what it was like growing up as the children of Tom, or what it was like for Tom as he was growing up. And we've had a lot of really wonderful requests in that genre. So today is going to be a very fun show. I have a list of 18 potential questions to ask my guest today. Joe, welcome to the Donna Howell Show.
This is going to be fun. And disclaimer, I don't know these questions. It's a total blind interview. She's just going to hit me with stuff. And I don't know where she's coming from or what it is you maybe have wanted to know, but we're just going to react, right? Have a conversation.
React in real time. I'm just going to jump straight into it. The first question, what was it like growing up as the child of Tom Horn? Were there any unique experiences or expectations on you?
In a word, it was the best.
Yeah.
There was no greater dad. Obviously, I'm biased because he was mine, but he exemplified, I think, as close as what can be embodied by a human being, Christ-likeness, balance, steadfastness. He was a warrior in terms of being that very strong pillar that my mom knew she was safe with, and people that knew him knew you did not trifle with mom, but he was gentle and measured. I mean, just how many more adjectives and words to describe?
That's one of the things, if I can jump in real quick, that's one of the things that I think is kind of funny, because people that listen to how we talk about our dad and what it was like to be in our family, they might be under the impression that we are, putting it a little bit through a rose-colored filter here.
It's performance.
We talk so highly of it, but it's true.
No, it really is.
It was legitimately true. What were some of the unique experiences that you went through with Tom, or some of the expectations that he had on you?
Well, okay, so I'll give you a really tough one and then I'll give you a really fun one. Okay, the really tough one was, being his son, he absolutely refused. We owned many, many companies and were in charge of many, many ministries coming up. So from the time I was a little kid, he always expected us, and you know this, he always expected us not to just work hard.
Right.
To set the bar.
Right.
And if there was even the illusion of nepotism, he would often bring us in when he was going to discipline the staff or go over a policy that needed emphasis. He would purposefully drag us into the front of this thing, visibly, so that the rest of the staff understood that no one is above the rule.
Right.
So he would, for example, he might say something, and I'm just making this up, but let's say you're supposed to have your, we had a catering business. Let's say all of the food from your delivery truck has to be back in the freezer by 4 p.m. And he's had issues with people doing it at 4:17 and then 4:30, and they're getting later and later and later. He would address the whole staff, and he would then say, now, Joe, this includes you.
Right.
I don't want anybody here being later than 4 p.m.
Right.
And I knew what he was doing, but he was setting the bar, and he was letting everybody else know no one is above the law. And he honestly wanted his kids to be the example. He wanted for us to be able to be the ones that he pointed at when he then, look at the way that Donna does this particular thing. Look at the way that Allie does this. That's more of what I'm wanting. So it was a tough, at times, road to hoe. But then if you look at the quality that he drove us towards, I pray that you see that when you look at production values at Skywatch TV or anything else that we're doing. You may not even agree that it's the best work you've ever seen, but it's my best.
Right.
I'm not even saying I'm any good at anything, but it's my best, okay?
Right.
Like legit, before the Lord, go to sleep at night, I'm honestly doing everything I can. I'm not phoning anything in. I'm doing everything I can to do my best. And it's because, for 44 years of my life, that was grilled into my brain.
Speaking of work ethic, the thing that was grilled into my brain over and over and over again and over and over and over again all throughout life, and you'll know this, he used to say, it isn't how you enter, it's how you leave.
Oh, yeah.
And that the context of that would be whatever it is, a church, a ministry, a job. It isn't how you come into a job, it's how you leave. And so this high standard of work ethic that you're referring to, it wasn't just make sure you go in there and impress everyone. It was once you set your own bar and you've proven that you're capable of doing that, don't ever let that bar slip down, because you want to leave that position in the same way that you came in, with trumpets of wonderful, Joe's amazing, but you better leave with trumpets of wonderful, Joe's amazing.
I don't know when I leave, how I leave, and whether anybody's going to say anything was amazing. There might be signs of relief that he's finally out of the way. We can get a real administration in here. But all kidding aside, no, seriously, he wanted his kids to embody something he was proud of. And I will say, it was not an iron fist. It was not unruly. We weren't the kids who had to sit and play the piano for 12 hours a day and somebody would whack our hands with a yardstick because we're not perfect. It was nothing like that. He would then explain to us how later in life, these ethics are going to mean a lot to you. They're going to open a lot of doors for you. You're going to be ready. He always said, don't follow the crowd. Don't let them define for you what the ceiling on your effort should look like.
Right.
Always do your best. You be the one to set the bar. So anyway, and then I teased a fun one. This is really quick. So this is the kind of dad he was. Every year when I was a kid, he would take me, especially when we lived in Oregon and we were close to the pine trees in winter, he would take me on a train ride or a trip up to, the forests in Oregon and get our little permit to go chop down a little 4-foot pine tree where they're growing them specifically for Christmas tree harvesting. And we'd go out in the woods, and that didn't just mean we were going to go out in the snow with our boots on and pick out a Christmas tree. We would take my BB gun. We'd set up pop cans in the forest somewhere and shoot them down and, of course, pick them all up at the end. And one day, I was probably 9. He's like, you want to drive? I get to drive? I think you're ready. He goes like this, and I jump over and I get in his lap because my legs aren't even long enough to do both, And I reach way down and I said, you don't care how fast we go? And he says, nope, not in short bursts. I don't think I care. I basically stood on the gas pedal, spinning out in what's a mix of sludge and ice. We roll about 12 or 13 feet towards now what is a tree line of pine trees, and he's like, okay, okay. He had to pull my leg off and hit the brakes. He's like, I'll let you drive some more, but you got to be willing to listen when I say it's time to stop. Okay, all right. Right? I was still excited about the speed we were getting. Anyway, just moments like that, man. Just he and I out in the middle of literally nowhere. If we'd gotten a flat, oh my goodness.
One of my fun memories of bringing together work ethic and expectations and all of that, I got in trouble at work one time when Dad was not my boss, but he was the boss of my boss. It was an unusual situation where Dad was kind of the director over a camping ministry, and one of those camps had its own director under him, and I was working for him, and his name was Charles. And I remember this time they were doing a review of me, and Dad came in and he goes, hey, Charles, how's my kid doing? And so Charles, he goes on and on about, I have a good work ethic and I do all these things, but he's got one complaint. And his complaint about me was that I was very annoying because he would give me a job to do and I would go do it and come right back. What do you want me to do next? He was annoyed by this. And Dad was
managing
like,
people. You got to think of another thing now.
Right.
And when times aren't super busy, it's kind of tough.
So Dad's response to that was, well, is she doing the job right? Oh, yeah, she's doing great. If I give her this toilet over here to scrub, it shines like the top of this Chrysler building. If I tell her to wax that floor, it's waxed perfectly. First time, everything's great. And Dad says, well, that's good. So the only annoyance is that you're constantly having to give her more things to do because she's not going to stand around and just not work for that hour. And Charles is like, yeah. So Dad's response was, okay, I'll talk to her. And he takes me outside and he goes, keep doing that.
Oh my gosh, that was the tar. I don't want to talk to her. Keep doing that.
Keep doing that. So he said that was the greatest problem you could have. Okay, let me go to another question here on this list.
All right.
Did you always know that you would end up in ministry, or was there a time you wanted to pursue a different path?
Oh, no. I mean, okay, so like my first dream, I'm 12, I'm going to wrestle for the WWF.
Right.
And I knew I had a lot of work to do on my body, getting bigger and bigger, but I wanted to be a wrestler so bad. Jason Pumphrey and I, my childhood best friend, we were going to do it. It was just built in. It was like Some kids know that one day they're getting out of high school, they're going to college. It's just, you talked as part of the built, it's, of course I'm going to college. We are going to professional wrestling school because we're going to be wrestlers. And it's just like, by the time we got into kind of high school, we started sorting out that it was probably never going to happen for us. There was a lot about it that we just kind of outgrown the want to do that. There were other times where I absolutely had stepped away from ministry to pursue, much more money, running my own companies and things. One of them was, about 11 years ago now, actually, dog training. I was taking on work from people that had difficulties with all kinds of canine behavioral. They needed somebody to come do interventional work. They've got a biting dog, or they've got a dog that's guarding resources or food aggressive or whatever. And they would call me, and I would show up with my books and DVDs and do training. And the closest thing I can hearken it to is if you ever saw Caesar Milan when he does The Dog Whisperer, or later he had that show Caesar 911. Mm-hmm. Not that he and I were clones in terms of training, but just that whole idea. You get a call, you go out on the scene, you show up at their house, you try to determine mostly what the human problem in the equation is that's leading to this imbalance in the home, and try to train these people that, some of them have great instincts, some of them don't. So you're kind of trying to determine whether you can even keep a dog that might actually be a danger to somebody in a home that's never going to have the right capacity to do what is safe for them and their kids. Mm-hmm. So you're training dogs in the field, you're making determinations. Anyway, making more money, and at one time even asking, our father Tom, because I was doing that while I was also trying to help him run Skywatch at the time, is there any reality where he could please find support to replace me? And his whole adage was always, God's in control. He's got this. If you want to go live your dream. So there was never any head trips.
Never. Right.
Never obligated me to the ministry or anything like that. But this was back in like 2014-ish. Skywatch has just kind of come on TV networks, and I was just tore up at the idea that I would end up being with the ministry. Mm-hmm. At the same time having this thing that I loved, and I was just being burned to a crisp in terms of energy because I was trying to do both. So when you ask me, have I always thought I was going to end up in ministry? That's why I say no. There's a funny history here that a lot of people don't know about, going back to Skywatch TV in particular. When I was doing the dog training and I was in love with so much of that, I felt like I had landed on almost a calling. It really felt to me like this was what I was born to do, man. I just instinctively understood dog behavior and what's triggering these bite responses and how to help the owners do different things. It just was like my jam. And, word of mouth. So I would do things, and it was done really well, and then people would recommend me, and I ended up with I didn't even have to advertise. So much work. And then my good friend, Darren Pappas, who at the time was the Branson dog guy, he had been there 20 years. His Rolodex was this deep. Just hundreds of clients. And he moves to California like in 2015. And he calls me and he says, Joe, I'm giving you my entire business.
Wow, yeah, I remember that.
Remember this?
Yeah.
So this might be a long answer, but I'm giving some meat on the bone here. Real reasons why I was wanting to pursue this thing. I'd worked very hard. I'd started my own business, had my own vehicles with graphics and, window decor with my branding and my telephone number on the car. And I'm out like 4 to 5 days a week training dogs, sometimes multiple clients in one day. And then Darren hands me his Rolodex. He says, I'm moving to California to be with my daughter. There's all of these people. Some of them have money. Some of them are in Kimberling City. Some of them are the local Branson stars. Some of I'm giving you my whole business. And so I'm submerged by fire, and I did not feel at all like I could keep up with all this. So I come to Dad and I say, Dad, I just cannot do Skywatch TV, man. It's God's got it, man. He's got it. He'll work it out.
Yeah.
And so for a couple of years, there was this time where I was looking for my replacement.
No, I remember we had meetings discussing your exit strategy.
And
at the same time, about the same time as when you wrote the foreword to a book of Defenders at the time called Do Our Pets Go to Heaven? And you talked all about this particular season of dog training and how you came to be very affectionate towards dogs and understand them. And so all of that is also documented in that.
And I don't know if this is more than anybody ever dreamed of, but I just think people that follow Skywatch might find this interesting if they've never heard this story.
Right.
Before Skywatch TV, I actually encouraged Dad not to start the ministry. I'm serious, man. Mm-hmm. I straight up told him when I was hearing him describe what he was getting ready to do with his retirement. Now, for context, if you're his son, you've also heard him talk now for like 6 years about the need to settle down and get mom set up.
Right.
He kept saying, if anything happens to me, I got to make sure mom is set up. And so it didn't make any sense to me at all that he would launch this experiment called Skywatch TV, basically putting almost all of his eggs in one big risky experiment called a new TV ministry. And yet that's what he felt like God was asking him to do. And he was so prophetic. He kept saying, years and years before it happened, you're gonna see, Joe, the internet's going to replace cable, and people are going to just go on their TVs. They're not going to have a dish. They're going to go right onto their brand new TV, and it's going to have all these little menus, and they're just going to watch TV from the internet. And he's like, we got to be a part of that. Skywatch TV's got to be a part of this. And so I told him, Dad, you can't do this thing, man. You can't start this.
Yeah,
I said, you're going to, now this is funny, pay attention. I said, you're going to take all of your retirement, you're going to gamble it on this big risky unknown that you may decide 2 years later you can't stand and it takes all of your time. I said, you're going to end up with a Walmart-sized grocery store building somewhere for sale, and you're going to have to buy it to put all of your new books and employees, and you're going to have 40 people ringing your phone. I went down this whole list, right? 40 people ringing your phone night and day. I have staff in the room that I think have heard this story. They're going to ring your phone night and day. This thing is going to own you. And all I've heard you say is you got to get settled so that you can take care of mom, and mom, if something happens to you, mom's set up. Man, this just sounds wild. I wouldn't do this at all. No, man, I'm telling you, God's doing something. We got to be obedient. Let's go. And then in Tom Horn wrecking ball fashion, he boom, boom, boom. He's got stuff, and he's talking to Bob Ulrich, and they're starting network conversations. And we're buying cameras.
You're bringing Gary Stearman out to help host. Yeah, I remember those days.
Long story short, about the time I'm into the dog training thing now, a couple years into Skywatch, post having told my dad, please don't start this thing, it's going to bury you. We ended up with more than 40 employees ringing my cell phone off the hook. And a giant grocery store that had just been emptied. And it wasn't even for sale. We had a mutual broker calls my dad back because she had heard that he was looking for a big building and said, hey, there's a grocery store down here that I can probably talk this guy into selling. He's getting close to retirement age. You want me to see it? Yeah, take a look. She calls back. Yeah, he wants to sell. So that was the second part of my prophecy, which was actually a joke and not a prophecy, but it was almost like God using his humor, like he's listening to my list of things. Don't do this thing, Dad. You're going to end up in a grocery store with 40 people ringing your phone. And anyway, so all of that I said happened. The difference was it was happening to me and not so much Dad. About the time we hit 2015 and a half-ish, 2016, and I'm collapsing giant swaths of the story here, I determined that God was not releasing me from Skywatch. It was not Dad. It was not that he wouldn't support me in my dreams to go be a dog trainer.
Right.
I just, looking at my life, the wager of my time, and the potential to do lasting ministry things, and decided for myself to shut down this thing that I loved very much, the dog training thing, which was going really well, and I was having a blast, and it was totally my deal. But it just, spiritually, I was discerning the harder thing, the thing that is less attractive and way more responsibility and not fun right now, is the thing I feel like God is saying, you need to prioritize this. And I just couldn't do both anymore. So a long answer. No, I did not always see myself in a ministry that, and certainly not one that resembles what I'm doing today. But I can see now, as I've become a child advocate, the things I'm doing for Rescue Us, the things I'm doing for the children of foster care, the things that we're doing as a ministry to stand in the gap for these little kids at Whispering Ponies Ranch, the content we're cranking out at Skywatch TV in these very prophetic times. I'm looking at this now, and especially that Dad has passed away. Much of what we see today would be a big question mark to me if you don't go back almost a decade ago and to just be obedient to God. I would not be ready right now if I was buried in a dynastic dog training enterprise.
Right.
And that's where I was going next. I was going to launch a reality TV show called Doggy Daycare with Joe Horn. And I was going to take problematic dogs home to my facilities and film day by day the progress, and then take the dogs back to the homes and they're rehabbed. And it was going to be this, I could totally have seen it being viral and merchandise and t-shirts. And that was part of what I said, okay, it's time to just work in the back. And I had no idea I'd ever host. For context, I had no idea I was going to be the CEO or the host or any of this stuff.
I
was literally, at this time, I'm giving up this thing to be the next Caesar Milan in my own head, to do the behind the scenes work of a ministry like Skywatch, which just at the time it was like, this is a brutal decision. I can't square it with what I want, but I'm going to do it. And as God always does, he shows you later illumination to the things that make no sense at the time.
Right. I was there for it. I witnessed everything that you're saying. But if we rewind, and so here's a teaser for next week, part 2 of this Joe doesn't know the questions I'm going to ask fun that we are having today. I want to go back even further because in your teen years,
Yeah.
when you were heavily involved, you actually led worship.
No.
Okay. Wait.
Are you going to ask me about James the Lesser?
I'm going to ask you to tell. Yeah, no, check it out. Check it out. Folks, if you have not read this book, it is so funny. Everyday Champions, unleash the gifts God gave you, step into your purpose and fulfill your destiny by Joe. I've got to tell you, of all of the books that I've ever read, that one is so hysterical. Your sarcasm carries those pages so beautifully well. And, because I'm your sister, I know a lot of the things that you're referring to, the memories that you're sharing. But you did share about the time that you weren't completely convinced about Skywatch. But back it up into your teen years. You were leading worship. You had a band called James the Lesser.
No.
There were childhood heroes that helped to make you who you are. And that particular book, there is this one era that I want you to talk about next week. There was this phase that you wanted to be a big deal in ministry. Like you didn't just want to be a minister. There was, sorry to mock you, Joe.
No, I deserve every ounce. Mock away.
It wasn't a humble, I want to serve the Lord. It was, I want to be the big deal. And
I wouldn't
really
have said that at
about
17. No, I know.
Well, folks, we are going to do this again. This is only part 1 of a part 2 series where we are going to be asking Joe some questions that he doesn't even know that I'm getting ready to ask. Very, very candid shows, getting to know you type shows, and a whole lot of fun. So you will not want to miss part 2 of this conversation coming up next. Thanks for joining us on The Donna Howell Show.